My name is Aaron Mace. I'm 25 years old, and until about 6 months ago, I worked as a cashier at a small hardware store in a town so small you could drive through it in under 10 minutes. Most people who met me didn't look twice. I was the quiet guy behind the counter, the one who didn't go out much, didn't talk about his past, and didn't seem to be going anywhere. That was exactly how I wanted it. What they didn't know, what no one in Ridgewater knew, was that I wasn't supposed to be there at all. That town wasn't my home. That store wasn't my career. And I wasn't who they thought I was. Back in another life, I was someone else entirely. Someone people recognized. Someone people chased. But let me start at the beginning. I moved to Ridgewater 2 years ago. I had a backpack, $3,000 in cash, and a forged ID. I rented a room from an older couple who didn't ask questions, and I got the job at the hardware store on my second day. It was boring but quiet. The kind of life where nobody pried, nobody poked, and nobody looked at me long enough to figure out what I was hiding. I got good at being invisible. But you know how small towns are. You stay long enough, and people start to get curious, especially when you don't have any family. Don't join in-town events, and never post anything online. People start to wonder. And in my case, that wondering became dangerous. It all started with a girl named Lucy. She was smart, friendly, one of those people who smiles with her whole face. She used to come into the shop to buy gardening tools for her mom. We'd talk a little, weather, plants, whatever, and then she'd leave. But one day, she stayed longer. "You ever think about doing something else?" she asked me. I shrugged. "This works for me." She tilted her head. "You don't seem like someone who belongs here." That sentence hit harder than I expected. She didn't mean it in a bad way, but it made my chest tighten. I laughed it off, but after she left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The truth was, I didn't belong there. Not really. I used to live in a world so far removed from Ridgewater that it may as well have been another planet. A world of suits, cameras, money, and secrets. My real name isn't Aaron Mace. It's Andrew Calderon. I was born into one of the wealthiest political families on the East Coast. My father was a senator, my mother a corporate lawyer. Our house had gates, private security, and a chef who made us omelets with herbs I couldn't pronounce. I went to private school, learned how to smile in front of cameras, and was taught that reputation was more important than truth. But that kind of world doesn't tolerate mistakes. And I made one. A big one. When I was 21, I discovered something I wasn't supposed to see. It started when I interned for my father's political campaign. At first, it was all routine. Press releases, coffee runs, spreadsheets. But then, I overheard a conversation. Two aides talking late at night, thinking no one was around. They were discussing a fund that didn't officially exist, connected to companies I'd never heard of, channeling money in ways that sounded off. I dug deeper, quietly, carefully, and what I found was a machine built on corruption, fake contracts, illegal contributions, bribed officials, even blackmail. I couldn't believe it. My own father's campaign was a carefully crafted illusion. The man I'd looked up to my whole life was nothing more than a puppet master pulling strings in the dark. I tried to confront him. That was my mistake. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "You don't understand the game you're playing," he said. "You think the world runs on honesty? Grow up, Andrew. If you want to survive, learn to be useful." I couldn't be part of that, so I made a copy of the files I'd found. Documents, audio recordings, bank transfers. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with them yet, but I needed proof, something real. That night, someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take anything, but they left a message. A printed photo of my younger sister, Olivia, taped to my fridge. My father was telling me to stay quiet, so I vanished. I left everything behind: my name, my family, my life. I took the evidence, changed my identity, and ran. I knew they'd come looking, so I stayed off the grid. No phones, no internet, no social media. Just Ridgewater and a job that paid in cash. For a while, it worked. Until Lucy. She wasn't trying to expose me. She was just kind, curious. But kindness is dangerous when you're living a lie. I tried to keep my distance, but she kept coming back. Coffee, conversation, jokes. It became harder to stay invisible. Then came the stranger. It was a Thursday afternoon. Sun beating down. I was stacking boxes of nails near the front when a man walked in. Tall, black suit, sunglasses, too polished for Ridgewater. He asked if we sold hedge trimmers. We didn't. He asked if I was the manager. I wasn't. He looked at me a second too long, just long enough for my gut to clench. The next day, I found a note slipped under my door. "You're not as hidden as you think." I almost packed up and ran that night, but I didn't. Something stopped me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was Lucy. Maybe it was the anger I'd buried for 4 years. I realized I was tired of hiding. If they'd found me once, they'd find me again. Running would just delay the inevitable. But fighting? That could end it. That's when I made a decision. One I'd been avoiding for years. I would finish what I started. I went to the old laptop I kept locked in a false bottom drawer. It hadn't touched the internet in years, but the files were still there. Every document, every audio clip, every photo. Enough to bury my father's campaign and half his associates. I didn't know who to trust, but I knew one name. A journalist I'd met once at a fundraiser. Olivia "Liv" Harper. She'd won awards for exposing corruption, and she'd hated my father's guts. I drafted an email, attached the files, and hit send. And then I waited. 2 days later, I saw her name trending online. Whistleblower exposes East Coast political scandal. Senator Calderon implicated in major cover-up. Anonymous source provides leaked evidence of corruption. My face wasn't in the story. My name wasn't mentioned. But I knew the walls were closing in. And so did my father. That's when things started to fall apart. The stranger in the suit came back, this time with a gun. He didn't come to talk. He came to silence me. Permanently. But he didn't know who he was dealing with anymore. And I was done being invisible. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just kicked in the door like he owned the place. I didn't even have time to flinch before the barrel of a pistol was aimed squarely at my chest. The man from the hardware store. The one in the black suit. "Andrew Calderon," he said in a voice so cold it could have frozen air. "You've made a mess." I didn't move. My mind raced, calculating. There was a knife in the kitchen drawer 3 feet away. Useless. The window was behind him. No time. I raised my hand slowly. "I think you have the wrong guy," he smirked. "That lie might have worked a week ago. Not now." That's when I realized it wasn't just me in danger anymore. If they'd tracked me here, they might have been watching me for weeks. Lucy. The old couple who rented me the room. Everyone I cared about, even a little, could get caught in the fallout. "What do you want?" I asked. He stepped further in, closing the door behind him. "The files, the originals, the ones you leaked. They're enough to cause trouble, but not enough to kill the machine. There's more, isn't there? I didn't answer. His silence told me he already knew. You think you're some kind of hero? He said, raising the gun. This isn't a movie, kid. There are no clean endings. You bring down one man, another takes his place. Maybe, I said, forcing calm into my voice, but that doesn't mean I stop swinging. He laughed. Then this is where your story ends. But it didn't. A bang echoed through the house. For a split second I thought he'd fired. But it wasn't him. It was Lucy. She stood behind him, wide-eyed, a frying pan in her hands, the kind you cook eggs in. She'd slammed it against the back of his head. The man dropped like a tree, unconscious before he hit the floor. Lucy stared at me, chest heaving. What the hell is going on, Aaron? I didn't answer right away. I went to the man, kicked the gun away, and checked his pulse. Still alive. I tied his hands with a phone charger, dragged him into the closet, and locked it. Then I sat on the floor and looked at her. My name's not Aaron, I said. It's Andrew. Andrew Calderon. Over the next hour, I told her everything. From the mansion I grew up in, to the files, to the life I'd buried. She didn't interrupt, didn't freak out, just listened. When I was done, she said, "Okay, so what now?" That question haunted me for days. The leak had gone public, but the story wasn't dying, it was spreading. My father was on the news, dodging questions. His aides were resigning. There were calls for investigations, but that also meant they were hunting me harder. Not just to stop me from talking again, but to make sure I didn't exist. The man in the suit was a message. Next time, they'd send someone who wouldn't miss. I needed to disappear again. But something in me refused. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was angry. Maybe it was Lucy. I don't know. But I knew I couldn't run. Not again. Not when the truth was finally cracking through the surface. So I did something I swore I'd never do. I called my sister. Olivia picked up on the second ring. Andrew? Her voice was a whisper. Is it really you? I hadn't spoken to her in years. The last time we talked, we were both kids, sitting on the balcony of our summer home, watching the sky bleed orange. I need your help, I said. Turns out she needed mine too. Olivia hadn't believed the campaign's lies. After I vanished, she started digging. Quietly. She knew about the secret accounts, the hush money, but she couldn't prove it. Not without me. I sent her the rest of the files. Every last shred of evidence. Together we put together a case so airtight it could choke a system. We didn't go to the press this time. We went to someone stronger. A federal prosecutor. 1 week later, my father was arrested. Indictments followed. Charges. News vans lined our old street. Senators gave speeches on ethics. The Calderon name, once a symbol of power, became a cautionary tale overnight. And me? I still wasn't safe. Even with the case open, there were too many enemies. My face never went public, but people whispered. People guessed. One night, a man tried to follow me home. Lucy saw him first. She screamed. He ran. But I knew it wasn't over. That's when I made my final move. I wrote a letter, not to the police, not to the press, but to every corrupt name in the files. I told them everything I had. I warned them that if anything happened to me, or anyone close to me, those files would be released to every major news outlet in the country. All at once. No redactions, no mercy. Then I gave the files to someone I trusted. A hacker friend from years ago. He disappeared to a city I'll never name, with instructions to push the nuclear button if I ever stopped responding. Insurance. I was no longer running. They were. After the trial, The dust finally started to settle. My father was sentenced to 25 years. Dozens of careers ended. The system didn't collapse, but it cracked wide open. And in Ridgewater, people started looking at me differently. They didn't know the whole story, but they knew I'd stood up for something. They knew I wasn't just the quiet guy behind the counter anymore. Lucy stayed, even after everything. She asked me once, "Do you ever regret it?" I thought about that question long and hard. I missed my sister. I missed the parts of my life that were easy, where food showed up without effort, and danger felt like something in a book. But I didn't miss the lies, the masks, the weight of pretending. "No," I said, "not for a second." And I meant it. My name is Andrew Calderon. I burned down the life I was born into so I could build one I could live with. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of the man I'd become. It's been nearly 2 years since my father was sentenced. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear his voice booming from a hallway, or the echo of leather shoes pacing across polished marble. But those ghosts stay quiet now. They know they've lost their power. I didn't expect peace to be so quiet. There were no celebrations when justice finally landed. No parades, just time, a lot of it, and the chance to start over. Lucy and I moved into a small home just outside of Ridgewater. It's nothing like the house I grew up in, which is exactly why I love it. The floors creak, the walls are thin, and the roof leaks when it rains too hard. But it's real. It's honest. Every nail in the wall, every squeaky hinge. Ours. I got a job fixing computers at a local shop. The owner, Hank, is this retired Army vet with a scar across his neck and a love for coffee that borders on obsession. He doesn't ask too many questions, which I appreciate. I'm just Drew to most people now. Not Andrew Calderon. Not the disgraced senator's son. Just a guy with steady hands and a knack for broken tech. Some days, it feels like none of it happened. Like the files, the threats, the blood, the courtroom. All of it was part of someone else's story. But then, I catch my reflection in a store window, or see a name on the news, and it comes rushing back. The fallout didn't end with my father. His trial opened doors that had been locked for decades. Other names began to surface. Other investigations. A domino effect across the country. The machine didn't die, but it coughed and staggered. And then there was Olivia. My sister never returned to politics. She said the world had seen enough Calderons for one lifetime. Instead, she started a nonprofit focused on legal aid for whistleblowers. She called it the First Flame. I never asked if it was named after me. We talk every week now. Sometimes it's about work. Sometimes just about the weather. The distance between us is smaller than it's ever been. I visited our mother once. She wasn't charged. Probably never would be. Her role was always quiet. Always behind curtains, but when she opened the door and saw me, I think she knew, somewhere deep down, that everything she'd helped build was gone. "I kept your room just the way it was," she said. I told her she didn't have to. We sat for a while. I asked her if she'd known everything. She didn't lie. She just said, "I knew enough." That was the last time I saw her. I don't hate her, but I don't go back either. One day, while cleaning out an old box in our garage, I found a photo. It was of me at 11 years old, sitting beside my father on the Senate floor. We both wore suits too big for us. He had his hand on my shoulder, smiling like the cameras were the sun itself. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I burned it, not out of anger, out of necessity, because I am not that boy anymore. I've had a lot of people ask me, quietly, carefully, if I regret exposing my own blood. If I ever wished I'd just walked away and left it buried. And I tell them the truth. There's a part of me that wanted to run forever, change names, move to some coastal town and fish for a living, or sweep streets in a country where no one ever heard of politics. But I knew that wouldn't be living. That would be hiding. I didn't tear down my father's empire out of hatred. I did it because no one else could. Because the people suffering from his decisions didn't have power. Because if I didn't act, I'd carry the guilt of silence until I died. And because the truth, raw, ugly, and dangerous, is still better than a perfect lie. My hidden identity wasn't just a fake name and a changed haircut. It was the prison I'd put myself in. And now I'm free. Sometimes I speak at schools, not as Andrew Calderon, but just Andrew. I talk about choices, about integrity, about how it's not the title that makes the man, but the spine beneath it. One student asked me if I ever wanted to be in politics again. I laughed. Then I said, no. But you did something politicians couldn't, she said. You told the truth. That stuck with me. I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to breathe without shame. To build something honest in a world wrapped in filters and masks. That's what I have now. Lucy started painting. She's really good. Our house is filled with colors I never thought I'd see. Warm ones, alive ones. Sometimes I find her in the kitchen, humming to herself, making pancakes at 2 a.m. because art doesn't follow the clock. I love that about her. We're expecting a baby in spring. And when they ask me one day who I am, I won't say Calderon. I'll say, I'm your dad. And that'll be enough.